The Hagmann and Hagmann Report for today. It's Monday, February 23rd, 2015. Welcome, listeners from coast to coast, pole to pole, and worldwide to a special edition of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. I'm Doug Hagmann, co-host along with my son Joe Hagmann. Together, we are the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. You're listening to the only show where the news is presented to you in 3D. We look well beyond the headlines, the bylines, a fog of disinformation, misinformation, to bring you the news behind the news. We broadcast live every weeknight, Monday through Friday, from 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern. Our home base on the internet is hagmanandhagmann.com. We're also simulcast by the Christians United Broadcasting Network. There you can tune us in at thehagmanandhagmannreport.com. I want to thank everyone for deliberately listening to us, tuning us in, and going after the truth. It's so important as we walk through this minefield of current events together, and it's really a minefield. Tonight we've got a very, very special show planned for you. Before we get into the details of tonight's show, I just want to mention a couple of things. Last night I was honored to be a guest on the Common Sense Show. I don't know how many of you out there might have heard my appearance on that. The only reason I bring that up is because it's interesting what Dave Hodges and I spoke about last night.
You were on with Dave Hodges last night. I was on with Brother Marcus and Curtis
on Saturday. That's right. Yeah. Well, I just want to say this. What Dave Hodges and I spoke about last night, 24 hours later, it's on the headline of Drudge, not because of us, of course, or nothing to do with us, but it was about the internet and the net neutrality. But okay, so yeah, Joe, welcome. You're really your first full day back in the studio since you had a back operation, and but you're back. Folks, I checked out his scar, or not a scar, his laceration with stitches, and here's the deal. He's supposed to have his stitches taken out in when we're going to be down in Orlando. And what I did was I offered to take him out.
Save me some medical bills and
yeah, I can do that.
See, the problem was they wanted to have the stitches removed in the time with submittal when we'll be in Florida, so I got to keep him in till we get back.
Yeah.
But I guess if that's the worst I got to go through, then everything went well.
Well, yeah, and it looks good. It's healing well, and that's good. So you were on with Brother Marcus. Now, Joe, let me ask you a question here, because I just noticed something here in the background in the studio. Our guest is going to be on from 9 to 11. Was that confirmed, or?
Yes, 9 to 11.
Okay, because there might be an issue here.
Pope.
Mia Maria
I want to say
Pope.
Robertson. Mia Marie Pope.
Yeah. She's really a very, very... she's no slouch, let me tell you. She's a very good person, very, very knowledgeable. She's going to be talking about Obama, the foreigner, the cocaine-smoking homosexual in Hawaii during the 1970s. And she's slated to be our guest from 9 to 11, sharing her observations with us, first-hand observations of Obama during that time. Now, I'll say this. Wow! It's buckle your seatbelts, because she's got a lot of information to get into. Man, we did not put this up ahead of time, because you know how those things go, sabotaging of radio shows. Now, also tonight, I just want to mention this. I'll be a guest on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie from during the first hour. That's from 1 to 2 a.m. Eastern, and so I'm honored to be a guest. The topic there is going to be ISIS and the threat to the United States. And then, of course, this week, Joe, you and I are getting prepared to go to Orlando for the Prophecy and the News Conference. Folks, if there's any chance at all you can go, please try to go. We'd love to meet you there. We'd love to fellowship with you. We really would, and I know that there's live streaming for, which is a really great deal. Certainly sign up for that. But boy, if you can make it, if I could talk you into it, if Joe and I could sit here and talk you into it, if you're on the fence, we'd love to. We'd love to meet you down there. Paul McGuire's going to be with. I mean, going to be down there. Russ Dizdar, Jerome Corsi,
Joseph Farah, Jonathan Kahn, just so many people we've had on the show, and others that we look forward to networking with. Doc Marquis will be there, a whole bunch of people. And before we do start, I want to thank John and Chance and Jeannie and all the people who are working with the H&H Connections, helping people getting connected with one another for fellowship. I want to say a special hello to Jim McGill from Bloomberg, Pennsylvania today. John spoke with me before the show and wanted to give you a special shout out and hello and a thank you for reaching out and a thank you for listening. We truly do appreciate it. Jim McGill in Bloomberg, Pennsylvania. So hello to you and welcome to H&H Connections. But we do have a lot to get into tonight in the first hour, and this can go one of many ways. We have a lot of news on the net neutrality bill that we see, that we've talked about. We have some DHS news. We have news from the military. We have, and not just the American military, but also the Israeli military, and a kind of a strange headline. But here, Republican FCC Commissioner asked Wheeler to delay net neutrality vote release proposal. They're calling for a release of the 322-page Internet regulation plan to publicly allow the American people a reasonable period of not less than 30 days to carefully study it. That from Republican Commissioner Ajit Pai and Michael O'Reilly said in a statement Monday. Then, after the Commission reviews the specific input and receives it from the American public and makes any modifications to the plan as appropriate, we could proceed to a final vote, they say. The Commission is set to vote on Wheeler's aggressive proposal, which will regulate Internet service providers as a public utility and set new standards for speed and pricing on Thursday, when it is expected to pass a partisan vote of 3-2. It goes on to say, with the future of the entire Internet at stake, it is imperative that the FCC get this right, the Commissioner said. And to do that, we must live up to the highest standards of transparency. Transparency is particularly important here, and because the plan in front of us right now is so drastically different than the proposal the FCC adopted and put out for public comment last May. So we're getting some pullback here to release this 332-page document, they say in this article.
Yeah, Joe, that's boy, yes, that's something that I want to get into. Initially, it was 322, and I mentioned this last night. 322 is an important number. It has significance to the Illuminati and to the people behind the powers, or the powers behind the people, I should say. So it's interesting now. We're seeing that number 332 come up, and well, I just find it interesting.
Absolutely. And something you're going to be talking tonight on the possible threat ISIS poses in our malls and public places. Well, did you see the warning the Department of Homeland Security put out pertaining to the Mall of America? And Jen Johnson put this out, the head of Homeland Security. Well, the Department of Homeland Security has denied it is aware of any credible terrorist plots against shopping centers on U.S. soil after the chief advised shoppers, particularly in the Mall of America, to be careful following threats from Somali extremists. They go on to say, we are not aware of any specific or credible plot against the Mall of America or any other domestic commercial shopping center. Spokeswoman Marcia Catron of the Department of Homeland Security said in a statement. She noted, however, that the federal agents have shared the information with local law enforcement and the private sector partners.
Yeah,
if there's not a threat, what information are you sharing?
Well, and this goes back earlier this year. Last week actually, Aaron Klein wrote an article. It was published on WorldNet Daily ISIS planning attacks on U.S. soil. Now, this is interesting because the information actually comes from the Egyptian intelligence agent. The information actually comes from Egypt. Interrogations of ISIS members who were captured in the Sinai Peninsula were interrogated by Egyptian officials, security forces. And what they had said was, what they had found through their interrogation process is that ISIS is planning a ground offensive in the spring and summer aimed at taking over more territory across the Middle East and Persian Gulf. Now here's the situation, okay? We're looking at this potential threat. And this, I believe, is indeed a threat. I have no doubt in my mind that there are attacks being planned here on the United States. But what we have to do, at least in my view, and looking at some of the research and finding of InfoWars media sources, we have to line up the actions of our own intelligence services. We have to line these up with the threat itself, because we know. Look, and Joe, before we've got a wing participant, a criminal. It'd be like a criminal who has been in and out of jail, we'll say, for bank robbery his entire life. He was 18. Let's just say this. When that person comes out of jail, well, he's a bank robber. No, that's what he's experienced in. His propensity is to go back to robbery, have of conduct. So there's no doubt it's a threat. In fact, more on this, folks. We're going to do to take just a very quick break.
Here's some issues.
We got an issue.
We have a few. You're breaking up. We're getting listeners say you are breaking up. Folks, am I breaking up? Can you hear me?
All right, we'll take care of this.
They're saying, okay, breaking up badly. Okay.
Me or you both?
Both of us. We are badly. So we're going to take a break. We're going to come back. I sound choppy.
There are a couple of things here with respect to the sound issues. I did check on a cable, and everything's wired up pretty tight. Here's something interesting, okay, because of our second hour guest, who's going to extend into finish up the program. Something very interesting. We did not publicize our second hour guest, and we didn't publicize our second hour guest because of the nature of the topic. And the nature of the topic is Obama, his formative high school years. Now, Joe, can you tell me, does this sound any better?
According to people in chat, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Well, sometimes Skype is just a little bit off, and we've got the largest the biggest bandwidth you can buy upstream and downstream. So, anyway, having said that, our second hour guest is what a great person that she is. I've had the opportunity to speak with her. She's a class act, a very class act, and she has a lot of information about Barry Soetoro. But anyway, Joe, I didn't mean to interrupt you. You were talking about what when I was away from the microphone?
Well, I was talking about how the Department of Homeland Security has said there's no credible threat to the mall terror threat warnings, but instead issuing a new report against what they perceive to be domestic right-wing extremists.
Okay.
And they released a new report, a terror threat from a domestic terror threat from the right-wing sovereign citizen extremism movement, and it comes as the Obama administration holds a White House conference to focus its efforts on fighting violent extremism.
Gotcha.
Some federal local law enforcement groups view domestic terror threat from sovereign citizen groups as equal to, in some cases or greater than, the threat from foreign Islamic terror groups such as ISIS.
Okay. Okay. And see, this is what we have to be very, Joe. I believe that this is what we have to be very concerned about. And folks, tonight when I was asked, Lisa Lyon called me and we were talking, and we were talking about the threat of ISIS, or threat by ISIS or Islamic terrorism here in the United States. I think we got to be really careful about this in how we explain the threat, because some people will totally dismiss the Islamic threat and say, well, it's a false flag operation. Well, not entirely, because that you can't minimize the threat by the Islamic terrorists, okay? But you have to factor in the mitigating circumstances, that being the facilitation by our own intelligence services, domestic and otherwise, into the mix here, into the ISIS threat. So it's the complicity that's the factor. So do not dismiss Islamic terrorism in favor of or because of the DHS or Department of Justice or CIA, Western intelligence involvement. Don't dismiss that. They're both, they operate like a very well-oiled machine together, and the goal is chaos to order. That's what the goal is. So, having said all that, I would be very concerned, and I am very concerned about mall shootings. I'm very concerned about school shootings, like a Beslan affair.
Sleeper cells. Yeah,
and this, by the way, this is in part what we're going to be talking about in Orlando, in our part of the presentation, at least my end of things. And I know, Joe, you've got some things planned, and we're going to be working together to do this. But there are sleeper cells here in the United States, and believe it or not, Mia Marie Pope, who will be coming on the second hour and the third hour to talk about Obama, like us, when we uncovered various cells in this country and turned it over to the FBI, well, and the Department of Justice, what happened was they turned around and didn't do anything about it and notified certain individuals who were involved in the compounds. So, yeah, this is Mia Marie Pope knew about knew Barack Hussein Obama as Barry Soetoro, notified the Department of Justice and said, look, I knew this guy when he was Barry Soetoro, when he was hanging out with Gay Ray and buying drugs and smoking crack and using a different social security number and all this. I knew this guy back then, and here's my information. And what happened? Nothing. Anyway, you know what, Joe, before we go on, let me just take care of this bit of housekeeping. I'm so proud, so very proud. We here at the Hagmann and Hagmann Studios are so proud to announce that portions of tonight's broadcast, that's sponsored by NatureBox. NatureBox ships great tasting, wholesome snacks right to your door, so you can forget about the vending machine and begin snacking much smarter with wholesome, delicious treats. Folks, we're going to be talking about this all the time and really promoting this, because I really believe this is a great service. We use it at the Hagmann household. We use it here at the Hagmann and Hagmann Studios, at our offices. You can support, in part, this broadcast by ordering a free, that's right, free NatureBox sampler box at naturebox.com/CFP radio. That's naturebox.com/CFP radio. That's right, free NatureBox snacks found at naturebox.com/CFP radio. I want to make sure I mention that, because these people are, I mean, you talk about class companies, Class A companies, they're classy. Their products are great. They're good for you, and we enjoy them, and we're so happy to have this partnership with naturebox.com and, of course, naturebox.com/CFP radio. Anyway, now having said that, getting back to the news at hand, so what do you think, Joe? I mean, we can't minimize the threat of Islamic terrorism, but we have to factor in the mitigating circumstances or mitigating factors of involvement, right? For the facilitation of this stuff.
Well, yeah, we have to understand the war we're engaged in. It's not a normal asymmetrical style war where you have infantry, invading, and this is a guerrilla warfare tactic, the terrorist attacks, attacking public places. I mean, we've seen it in the international realm all too much. The Paris shootings, the mall shootings in 2013.
I thought you said parachuting.
Paris shooting.
Okay.
A 7-year-old suicide bomber kills 7 in Nigeria. I mean, what kind of war is this that we're fighting? Girls flocking to ISIS.
You know what that reminds me of? That reminds me of when you say girls flocking to ISIS. Remember when we had John Cameron on, who was a detective, and he serial killer, Zodiac, investigating.
Yeah.
Well, this reminds me of people, women who would propose or write letters to Charlie Manson, for example, and other serial killers in prison. I mean, this is really a sick and twisted, a very convoluted, psychotic type of mentality.
Yeah. And listen to this, and the government is doing their best to propagate this and use it to twist truth. This is from the Daily UK or Daily Mail. .uk. It talks about the terrifying rise of ISIS. A new map shows how terror group's tentacles reach from Algeria to Afghanistan. Well, they list Egypt as one of the countries under the violent insurgency of ISIS, and it says violent insurgency began in Sinai Province after dictator Hosni Mubarak was overthrown in 2011. No.
Sinai Province and Hosni Mubarak,
the head of the Muslim Brotherhood, was placed there by American.
Morsi came back in. Morsi replaced Mubarak.
Okay, Morsi replaced Mubarak. He was so they do have it right. I apologize. I'm thinking that Mubarak was the interim.
No, Mubarak was there before the State Department toppled Mubarak, and then Morsi came in, and of course, Morsi was deposed. But before that, he was deposed, Obama gave him $50 million.
Yeah, and I over the weekend heard about the I guess Egyptian's leader is a man named Sisi, and after the 21 Egyptians were killed, he launched missiles into the ISIS camp and took his country into a couple days of silence and mourning. And also Jordan had a soldier killed, and they launched an offensive or defensive, I guess it'd be an offensive or response action to an overwhelming, bombing campaign in support of the one troop that was killed. And what do? We're creating this.
Well,
let's think about before 9/11. Think of, we had Saddam Hussein, you had Gaddafi, you had these leaders in here. But was there this type of violence? And they want you to think this is the way it was before they stepped in and intervened and spread their democracy across, Africa, North Africa, the Middle East. But it wasn't. Things were calm.
That's right.
Working governments, armies, countries. All of these countries had sovereign elected or sovereign governments that were keeping control. Did they do things that were, here and there, a bit over the top? I'm sure. But, when you have people like our president inviting, and Hillary Clinton and such, inviting, Gaddafi to the White House and turning around and murdering him, and you have the same thing going on in Syria now, and this whole ISIS threat, we can't make heads or tails of it one way or another. Is it the intelligence agencies that turned the extremism or people into extremists? Is it these people? Was this a natural uprising? Is this? I mean, so many questions.
But you're right.
And you have the whole thing could have been squashed if the trained Iraqi army stood and fought their 20,000 men against a couple hundred Islamic fighters that were coming up on them, and they decided to flee how many thousands of the Iraqi army. But would that have happened if we didn't dismantle their army in 2003?
Well, Sybil Edmonds talks about Operation Gladio B, and folks, if you have a chance to listen to Sybil Edmonds on YouTube or in any interview, I would definitely do so. She gets into she has a lot of good information, and of course her position, prior to 9/11 was a translator, and she was summarily dismissed. Her story is an interesting one. We'll have her on the show, hopefully here as well. But go ahead, Joe.
You even have Bill Maher let me find this article, or this was a sound clip. I didn't upload it because it was attached to a long 9-minute video, but Bill Maher made this comment that I saw today as I got into the studio, apparently over the weekend on Saturday. This idea that we cannot even call it Islamic terrorism seems Orwellian to me. He goes on to say, it seems like we're paying a very high price for this, which is we can't discuss it even rationally. Can't we at least say that there are a number of factors that are involved, and religion is certainly one of them? President Obama presented this idea that it's poverty and education. It's poverty and education also, but why are they impoverished and uneducated? It's mostly because of their religion, he goes on to say. And Bill Maher has been one to hate religion, make movies about it and such. But I have seen him, as much as he attacks Christianity, I have seen him really go after the Islamic
but does that make him,
of this. No, it doesn't.
Does that make him good,
It shows me that at least people are wondering.
Okay.
At least there are certain, you see people like Bill O'Reilly or whoever, and their opinions never change, their views never change, or if they do, they're along, party lines or talking point lines. But I don't know.
We have to,
free speech is free speech, and,
yes.
We see that. Like I said, if he's learning that there's a lot more to this than he initially thought, and he's changing the way he talks about things.
Right.
I'm not saying he's good or bad, but it's something to pay attention to.
Well, and I think all of us, and folks, don't you find yourselves doing this as well? You start out with one idea, one way of thinking, and you look at something, you look at a situation, and you say, okay, this is what it is. Kind of like 9/11, for example. The attacks on 9/11. You start off thinking, okay, this is what it is what it is, right? And then the more you learn, your way of thinking changes, and as you grow intellectually, your opinions change, and you grow. There's a growth period there, and if you don't grow, and I always say too, when we have investigators talking about, in fact, a case, for example, when we have. Joe, you and I, we were doing one investigation where we had, I think there were 6 of us in a room. You remember that, the case of the dragon tattoo lady, right? I mean, where all 6 of us were in a room talking about one of the most bizarre cases we've ever encountered, and perhaps one of the most the oddest case in terms of subject identification. It was a case of appearing and disappearing and reappearing tattoo, and no, it wasn't one of those, scrape on, scrape off tattoos. It was anyway. But when you have 6 people in a room, if all 6 are thinking or agreeing with each other, then you don't need all 6. You know what I mean? It's if 6 people are saying the same thing, only one person is really doing the thinking. So, so we grow, we mature in thought, and I think that's the way the listeners, each and every one of you, and I've seen, have I seen such a dramatic growth from ourselves, especially ourselves. I like to think that we've grown, but from the listeners, we've got some of the most intelligent listeners, and Dave Hodges was talking about this because we share listeners, and last night we were talking about. It's interesting to see the people, how they mature and intellectually grow. Man, you guys leave, and I'm going to tell each and every one of you listening to this, you guys leave the others in the dust. I mean, it's remarkable. Some of the emails that we receive and the letters that we get contain some of the most just some great stuff. Some things that we never thought, or we'd look at it from a different angle, and we'd get a letter on it. My goodness, a whole different line of thought takes place. But Joe, before because we're getting short on time here, and I want to thank everyone for your patience during that first part of the show, which we were breaking up. Apparently, it could be the weather up here too. It's about 20 below. We've got some real hard weather issues, and who knows? But anyway, can we revisit this? Internet communications issue for a moment. Yeah. Because I think it's important for people to understand this, and again, this might sound repetitive to you folks who listened to Dave Hodges, the Common Sense Show last night. And by the way, I think Dave is just a class act, and he does his homework. He does his homework extremely well, very detailed. In fact, man, we'd take him on as an investigator. He's got some uncanny investigative skills. But having said that, the FCC, Ajit Pai, came out with he was FCC commissioner, one of, I think, 6. He came out with a statement. This is back in earlier this month, February 6th. He came out with a statement about Obama's plan to regulate the Internet, specifically with this 322-page plan to regulate the Internet under the FCC Chairman Wheeler, okay? And it's interesting, first of all, number one, we know the issues that exist when a plan or proposed legislation is not released, is not made public. Why is that? Well, obviously there's something to hide here, just like the Affordable Care Act. So he's saying this should have been released, but it hasn't been. If it's released now, it's virtually too late. And I want to back up. Joe, you and I were talking earlier in between phone calls and numerous interruptions and different things, but we were talking about the significance of this 322-page report, and some say it's 332, but the initial reports were 322. And, of course, we all know 322 is Skull and Bones, and we know that the significance of that, the occultists, the people in power, the Illuminists, they love to send messages via numbers. Now, I know what you might be thinking. You might be thinking, you're nuts. And if I would have heard this 10 years ago, I would have thought, man, you know, this guy's really off his nut, right? But it's true. They communicate out in the open using numbers. Go think back to Obama's fake Twitter followers, 19.5 million. Remember that? Remember all of those different numbers that we saw on the Daily Mail? They all meant something. There were communications back then, and still are. Coded messages in plain sight. These are ritual numbers. Again, the London Daily Mail reported early last year, 19.5 fake Twitter followers, Obama. Why that number? How did they arrive at that number? 1.9 million fake followers of Michelle Obama. To say it another way, 33% of Twitter followers were reportedly fake. We see all of this taking place. We and if you listen to people, and I'll just toss, Fritz Springmeier out there, who Doc Marquis, Cisco Wheeler, I'm just trying to think of others. It doesn't matter. All of these people have reported about these coded messages. And even when you look at George W. Bush, the inaugural speech from January 20, 2001, look at the messages embedded in that inaugural address when he was talking about the angel of the whirlwind. And all of this is significant. So back to this FCC regulation. In my view, and Joe, you tell me, do you believe now, or do you believe, based on reasonable investigation and research, that given the fact that this bill, this legislation, proposed regulation, to be more precise, is 322 pages, is that the imprimatur or the approval of the globalists in power? Is that to signify, hey, thumbs up, baby? Would you say that?
It could.
Okay.
Very well could. We know that they use, as you say, neurolinguistic and numerical programming in their messages coded to each other on top of what, in the lines of propaganda that they feed to us. there is meaning to certain keywords that have different meanings to these people. I mean, they're using every bit of manipulation of coded messaging, and they want to do so to also not be on the record anywhere on an electronic phone call, you know what I mean? So they're looking to, and they always have. I mean, the number one way that these secret societies, these Luciferians, have communicated for years has been symbols.
Well, and it's right in our faces, and it's right in plain sight. And Ajit Pai continues, and I'm just going to go over this very quickly here, but I think this is important because we discussed this last night on the Common Sense show. Obama's plan is this monumental shift toward government control of the Internet. It gives the FCC the power to micromanage just about every aspect of how the Internet works. It's an overreach that will let a Washington bureaucracy, and not us, not the American people, decide the future of the online venue. It's no wonder net neutrality proponents they're already bragging that it's going to turn the FCC into the Department of the Internet. And for that reason, if you like dealing with the IRS, you're going to love this particular piece of regulation nonsense. And the renegade in chief, his plan to regulate the Internet, it's going to have a direct effect on your monthly broadband bills. It explicitly opens the door to billions of dollars in new taxes on broadband. And states have already started discussing exactly how they're going to spend this extra money, so you know this is really a fait accompli. And these new taxes are going to mean higher prices for us and hidden fees that you will have to pay. Folks, this is a direct attack on the alternative media. Those people who cannot afford our show, for example, we use broadband. We use broadband to present to you this product. What this will do, in effect, will censor us. How? Two ways. The obvious, money. And this is not a plea for money. This is just flat out, this is how it's going to affect us. Because of the bandwidth that this show takes.
Yep. This is the utility aspect of it.
That's right. So now what they're saying, well, okay, you're reaching, hey, congratulations, you got a great show. You're reaching, X million people per month, right? Well, we're going to bill you on your broadband usage when it doesn't have to be that way.
No, and they're turning this into a transparency, and I see an article here, I've never even heard of this website before, but FCC Republicans launch last-ditch effort to sink net neutrality plan, saying that this is a good thing that, we need, it's responsible. But, they, as we talked off air about the utility aspect of this, they're going to, the big example here is Netflix. And
33%.
Yes.
33% of the Internet.
Yeah. And they want to charge Netflix for all 33% of the Internet. Instead of paying a flat rate, which companies do, or a fixed rate, they're going to roll out these utility-type charges, which based on bandwidth or downloads or, if seeing as how we're on Blog Talk, if Blog Talk is getting hit with a huge amount of bandwidth because of our show, that cost is going to trickle down to us.
Trickle down, it's going to come like a tsunami.
Not only that, they state in here that, they're going to protect the freedom of expression and freedom of speech and keep everything, constitutional, as some would say. But the rules, and it's hard to speculate too much without the document, but from what lawmakers are saying about the document, is just it's probably worse than what than we even know.
Well, what I heard, and this, take this for what it's worth, from my source within the Beltway, not affiliated with any intelligence agency, but within the bureaucratic Beltway machinery, said that this will be ACTA, SOPA, PIPA, whatever you want to call it, on steroids.
Yeah, and they're using Title II of the Communications Act, an old it says
1996, right?
Yeah, the most controversial part of Wheeler's plan involves reclassifying Internet providers as common carriers to be regulated under the Title II of the Communications Act, the same statute that applies to old wireline telephone networks and mobile voice. Wheeler says this gives the FCC stronger legal authority to enforce net neutrality rules that were thrown out in court last year after a lawsuit filed by Verizon.
There were two lawsuits, by the way, that were filed and struck down, or the courts twice struck down this net neutrality, and this is net neutrality repackaged.
Yeah, they say that the FCC says that they will not impose rate regulations across the entire broadband industry, but it could declare that specific rates are not just or reasonable if complaints are lodged by consumers.
And the other part of this, too, is and folks, if the Internet were in a country, that country, the Internet economy, is $4.2 trillion, and it would be the fifth largest economy in the world, right behind the United States, China, Japan, and India. Think about that. So we're not talking any small amount of money. And so how is this going to affect you, the end user? Think of it this way. If you are deciding on going to Orlando next week for the conference, and you decide to, let's say you're coming from Ohio or New York or Pennsylvania or Virginia, West Virginia, whatever, instead of going down the interstate without molestation, you're traveling at 65, 70 miles an hour, whatever the speed limits might be. Imagine having toll barriers every 5 to 10 miles, or even less, where you'd have to pay like $5 or $6 per toll. That is, in my view anyway, a good analogy to this, to at least the FCC aspect. And don't forget, the FCC was created under the biggest socialist of them all, that's FDR. The last bastion of free speech and freedom, the Internet, is under attack, and it's not the end of the world, but it's going to be the end of the world of the Internet as we know it. And free speech, the alternative media, is going to suffer the most.
Yeah, and listen to this. Senator Obama said it's irresponsible for the FCC to vote on rules unreleased to the public as a sitting senator. Yeah,
well, obviously his view has changed dramatically, hasn't it? Affordable Care Act, and we know his handlers. We know he's got handlers. We know it's just not about Obama, the renegade in chief. We know it's about his left brain, Valerie Jarrett, and his right brain, Reggie Love. And, well, I shouldn't say Reggie Love. There are many others, but you get the idea. And then, of course, the string pullers, the people with the money, the bankers, the Jesuits, the Illuminists, I can go down the list, right? I mean, they're all in deep here. They're all pulling his strings. Yeah. So, folks, please pay attention to this. This is going to change everything. While we are so focused on ISIS and so focused on potential shootings or bombings or terrorist attacks here in the United States, what's happening that is misdirecting us away from, we're being focused on our safety. Meanwhile, our freedoms are being taken away. And this is one big freedom. Because now that level playing field that we enjoyed so much for the last decade, known as the Internet, will no longer function the way it was designed to function. And if you think for one moment that this is about fairness or about neutrality, it's not. It's about control and consolidation.
And they could need room for their patient data and the ability to track patient data. There was a report put out, American defense contractors, now healthcare providers, tracking patient data like tracking a missile by a John Stanton. It says, it opens with this: defense contractor is no longer a valid term for U.S. weapon makers. And it goes through some of the military-industrial complex and Eisenhower, his head of CIA, John Foster Dulles, but now how the MSCs, or multi-service contractors, will be used to, instead of creating weapons and building killing machines, they will use their war preparation tools for advances in the U.S. information and healthcare technology industry, and they will have an advantage over many private corporations unable to transfer battlefield innovations into useful technological products that can be used by hospitals, insurance companies, etc. Lockheed Martin has a Lockheed Martin's Health and Life Sciences division. It offers products for genomes, big patient data tracking, and analysis. What do they need that for? If there's no RFID chip, if there's no, digital health or digital 21st century, as the president's plan was released under that name. It goes on to talk about the essential functions of the health population in accord with reliable technologies through global partnerships like the UN, etc. They will create the system, and they will be able to project health costs, and potential savings. And they'll know real time if there's, from disasters like Hurricane Katrina to outbreaks like H1N1, if there are problems. And it goes on from there. I see we're at the top of the hour, so I'll cut back on this. This is something we'll get into more tomorrow, because this is very important.
Indeed it is. Folks, you're listening to a special Monday edition of the Hagmann and the Hagmann Report. This is a live broadcast. It is the 23rd day of February 2015. We're going to be coming back at the next hour with a very special person, someone
now by Mia Marie Pope on this 23rd day of February 2015. It's an honor and a pleasure to have her with us. Bring her on right now.
Hi, Joe. Hi, Joe and Doug.
Hi. Oh boy, I'll tell you, it's an honor to have you, ladies and gentlemen. Let me, Mia, if I can, let me give you a proper introduction, because a lot of people may not know, for example, who you are. I'll tell you, Mia is a wonderful Christian lady who I had the opportunity to listen to on a recent episode of Pastor Manning's program. Pastor James David Manning, of course, and our listeners are very familiar with Pastor Manning and his program. Mia is a woman who loves her country, who is a Christian, who knew Barry Soetoro, or Barack Hussein Obama as Barry Soetoro, in Hawaii back in the 1970s. Mia's background, which she will get into, is very interesting. But Mia is a person who cares about the fate of our country, who cares about the truth, and she has come out and, in fact, Mia has tried several times, or did several times, to communicate with the FBI, the Department of Justice, to inform them to provide valuable, critical information about the guy in the Oval Office. And folks, you can go to HagmannHagmann.com and click on the article that promotes Mia's appearance tonight. But Mia has our seal of approval. We have vetted her as investigators. We know who she is. Yes, she's the real deal, and I've got a lot of respect for this woman. And I would urge everyone as well to give her your ear, lend her your ear, listen to what she's got to say, because what she has to say is so important, and she's very articulate, and she is right on the money. And I'll tell you, it's an honor and a privilege for us to have on right now on the Newsmaker line, Mia Marie Pope. Mia, thank you for coming on, agreeing to come on our show.
Hey, thank you. Hey, we're all in this together. We're on in the same boat, so we got to make sure that our boat doesn't sink, because we all go down together. If these individuals that are currently running the show in Washington D.C., if they prevail, then we don't, and if we prevail, that's the only answer. But yes, I knew Barry back in 77, 78, and 79. And just to get a little bit more background, I'm from Hawaii. And, I got an opportunity to see Barry in action when he was not putting on a show, so to speak. This individual, Barry, is quite a chameleon-type character, which speaks to his psychiatric disorder that he's afflicted with. If it's showtime, then he, like what he does in front of the camera for your listening audience. But in real life, Barry is absolutely nothing like what people, the mainstream media rather, portrays him to be. Now, when I say a psychiatric disorder, I'm talking about the best and the brightest doctors in the field, MDs, PhDs, from all different areas of the world. So it's not a political agenda that they all seem to concur. Barry is diagnosed with what they call narcissistic personality disorder, and sounds, rather benign, but it's actually one of the worst types of sociopaths that you can be. So essentially, we have an individual whom is criminally insane, and in my opinion is far too close to the buttons for my comfort. You can't have someone like that with their hands anywhere near the levers. So I'm compelled, and I feel that it is my duty as a patriotic American. It's like my civic duty, my patriotic duty, to tell it. And one of the big consternations that I have is sort of a complacency with my fellow Americans and their false sense of security, because a lot of people watch too much television, and they buy into what these talking heads on television tell them. And little do they know, these people are only paid actors, and they're reading teleprompters, and it has nothing to do with investigative journalism. It's just they're reading their script and they're playing their role, and it's not fact. And so what I'm going to talk to you about is, first of all, substantiated in every way possible. So if there are some skeptical individuals, which I invite, and I love that spirit. If you don't believe me, fine. Just a couple of clicks and just a little bit of research. It's not a big project, and you'll find that everything that I'm telling you is substantiated by a secondary source. So,
okay, Mia, for the sake of our listeners who perhaps may have never heard of you or may have not heard you talk with Pastor Manning or anything, if we can put your relationship, and I say relationship, I suppose, in quotation marks, with Barry Soetoro in context. If we can go back to the beginning,
sure.
You said you're from Hawaii. Okay, so all right, back in the 1970s, you were in Hawaii, and just provide us some basic details of how you met Barry and the circumstances under which you met him, and so on. Kind of set the stage for all of this.
Sure. Okay, my dad was a musician, and he did some other things, which I'll get into a little bit later, but we would spend summers in Hawaii. Now, there was a lot of moving back and forth from California to Hawaii and that sort of thing. But when I was out of school, I had spent all my summers in Hawaii. Now, back in the day, maybe not unlike today, we kids were just sort of left to run wild, no supervision, and we would often hang at Kapulani Park or at the beach, or Waikiki area on the island of Oahu is, a fairly small area, if anyone's been there. So there was a group of us kids, we were just little street urchins, we just hung out and, too much time on our hands. And this individual, whose name was Barry, well, in my opinion, his name is still Barry, but, before he changed it to Barack Obama. And, this, as teenagers often do, we knew each other's business. We as any group of kids, we knew who was what and who did what, and it was just a somewhat of a social circle. And in Barry's case, he was as a common piece of common knowledge that he was gay and did drugs. And which, we're talking about the late 70s, right? So, this is prior to AIDS coming along, or at least showing its face in American society. So it was kind of a little bit of an avant-garde sort of thing back in the day. And certainly to possess powdered cocaine, it was, I hate to say it, but it was a little bit of like a status symbol. It implied that you had money. It implied that, because this is prior to crack. Crack became the cheaper form, and, that came on the scene a little bit later. But back in the day, it was in powder form, and it was extremely expensive. So, we've all perhaps heard the stories of, lawyers and successful people and doctors that went bankrupt, over that drug. Or, rock stars went bankrupt over that drug, right? So, you're talking about a significant amount of money, especially in $70s. So it was, it wouldn't have escaped our attention that Barry had this drug. And then, of course, coupled with the knowledge that Barry was into guys. And it was just, pretty much as plain as day that you knew that Barry was getting his drugs from his male suppliers, and one of which was his drug dealer and named Gay Ray. Excuse me. Gay Ray, his real name is Raymond Boyer, but his street name was Gay Ray, and we all knew him. And this guy was, what you would normally consider to be, he was standard drug dealer issue. He dealt everything. He wound up getting murdered by his gay lover back in '87. In fact, the perpetrator of that crime just recently got out of prison after doing 25 years for murdering him. So I mean, this was a stone cold kind of guy. By the grace of God, I never got into the drug scene. Not that I didn't have my opportunities. I did smoke marijuana back in the 70s, where, it was like, we had one joint for the six of us or something, and we'd pass around the doobie. But for whatever reason, I never, got into the drugs. And like I say, that's God's grace there. But, drugs are pretty common. And like I say, we didn't have supervision, right. And, our parents just let us run wild, basically. So that's how I came to know Barry in a casual, social scene. So, and I was, and again, I'll speak to this a little later as far as why I was maybe a little more alert than your average teenager about seeing through Barry's bull. But Barry always struck me as an individual that was just 100% full of bull. I mean, I never bought his stuff for a minute. And I kind of had a little bit of an adversarial thing with him at times, like, I used to tell him, "Shut up, Barry, shut up, stop lying." I was very dismissive of him, and and he does. By the way, that gets on his nerves. If you want to push a button with Barry, tell him to shut up. Ooh, he hates that. So one of the things with Barry is that he appears to. It's like he has this other, like a movie playing in his head or a loop that's playing in his head that has nothing to do with reality. And that's one of the first things I think you would sense about Barry if you were in his presence, is that you can tell that the guy's Looney Tunes. I mean, you really can tell. And it's kind of it's like a little bit of a macabre thing, because you can tell that the guy, there's no empathy there. There's no compassion there. It's simply his narcissistic thing. And that struck me.
Very
now,
interesting. And I just want to, I just want to tell people, ladies and gentlemen, Mia Marie Pope, that's our guest tonight, and she, actually, Mia, you're almost exactly 2 years younger than Barry Soetoro, Barack Hussein Obama, almost to the day. But having said that, the context in which you're talking in Hawaii, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, in that time period, as a teen, somewhat, back in the 70s, if you haven't lived during the 70s, you may not relate to this, but look, I was a young guy in the 70s. I understood this, and I watched it. So you develop these spheres of peers. That's pretty good, and acquaintances. And you knew who did drugs and who had the marijuana and who had the coke at the time, and so this is kind of how. This is how you were interacting with Barry Soetoro at the time. So and ladies and gentlemen, Mia has got just a marvelous, and you're not going to hear this. I have not heard you talk about this, but about how you knew things, when you knew it, and your background. We can get into that later, but boy, I'll tell you, when I found this out, when you had confided in me through correspondence and. Boy, things just clicked in my mind. So, folks, hang on because, man,
hang on to your seatbelts there. Yeah, put your seatbelts on, folks. Yeah. Well, one of my rationale for wanting to sort of get ahead of this is, let me first preface is that I didn't get into this arena of stepping up to the plate and disclosing or spilling the beans about Barry with the idea that I was going to surrender or back down or any of that. So I'm in, guns blazing. But one of the things that I anticipate is that I'm going to start getting some serious flack, which I all I can say, I'm not inviting it, but I mean, bring it if that's the way, you want to go. And everything I'm telling you is the truth, but unfortunately, there are either uneducated people or ignorant people or just plain out masochists that apparently like Barry. So for those individuals, I'm probably not one of their favorite people. So one of the reasons why I wanted to disclose something about my past, of which I had no responsibility for, but I think might possibly be used as ammunition against me, whereby I don't want the message to get lost. That's my only concern. As for what people think of me personally, it's really here nor there, but the message should not get lost, especially some of the things I'm going to be getting into. My dad was heavily involved with the Masons and the Knights of Columbus, and he did some pretty unsavory things. I didn't know this as in, at the dinner table, it wasn't discussed in an open manner, but the way that my dad tried to basically train me, like for an example, like I probably have as much knowledge as any 33rd degree Mason. I mean, the sacred geometry, the handshakes, the whole 9 yards. I mean, it's, I've never been a Mason. I would never be a Mason, but I'm just saying that for all that information that was disclosed to me, I would qualify as something like that. So to speak to some of my alertness, even as a young person, my dad always tried to train me to spot cracks in people's personalities, and that's part of his currency of what he did. And I'm ashamed of it, but I mean, my dad actually murdered some people, and it's a horrifying thing, and I didn't have any responsibility for it, but that's what he did. I was raised by an operator. I was raised by a rounder. Some people understand that vernacular. A rounder is, if you know what that term means, then you know what that term means. So, in any case, I have willfully and mindfully turned my back on all of that, and I certainly, I'm a person who loves and has empathy and compassion and all of those things. I have a personal relationship with Jesus, so I'm not anywhere in that ballpark. But it did somewhat frame my comprehension of how this world works. In other words, I really don't have sugar plum fairies dancing around my head. I see this world with pretty wide open eyes. So I've done all of that emotional work, and it's not a skeleton in my closet, but I think it's mention worthy that I bring that out just so that my opponents don't have the opportunity to sling it at me later. That's
Sure.
my rationale. So yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Very admirable. No, and ladies and gentlemen, it's interesting because we are very careful, and we vet people who we bring on now even more than ever before, because sometimes people aren't who they say they are. So we have to be a little bit more careful. And I just found your candor to be refreshing, and it's interesting as we talk. You provide information that confirms what we had developed, and you're the real deal. And I've got to tell you, you and folks, please appreciate Mia appearing tonight at great personal risk. Let's not.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking. Yeah, pirates have taken over the ship. I'm of no physical harm to anyone, but I keep a loaded .38 near me at all times. So I understand what time it is and what the game is, but the situation is such that, all right, I just so happened to be in a unique place at a unique time, so the job falls to me. Or either that, or I surrender to the criminals, and it's not in my nature to surrender to them. So, you know what I mean? It's like my back is up against the wall. I kind of have no choice. If I'm going to be an authentic person, I'm going to come out swinging. So, it's incumbent upon all of us. Doug, one of the things I would just love to see in more people is a resolve that, hey, look, we're the bosses. We pay the bills. That means we pay the cost to be the boss. Not criminals in Washington, D.C. We tell them. They don't tell us. And, one of the things that I think everybody can really relate to or might resonate with them is, say, for an example, you had a guest in your home. And, you're paying the bills, right? You're paying the mortgage, you're paying the bills, you're paying the cost to be the boss. That's your turf. Well, this guest in your home is disrespecting you at every possible turn, lying, cheating, snatching, sneaking, stealing. How fast would you show that individual the door? Most healthy-minded people would say, enough, right? Okay, so if we can extrapolate that a little bit to a bigger picture, we're the bosses, and Barry's lying, cheating, snatching, sneaking, stealing in your house. So we show him the door, and we've got to get to that place mentally with resolve. Like I say, it would infuriate you if someone were in your home doing that to you. This is your house. You're the boss. You pay the bills. That means you pay the cost to be the boss. We have the 25th Amendment. If there was ever a poster child for mental disabilities, which falls under that amendment to discharge Barry, Barry is the poster child for that. You couldn't get a more criminally insane individual in that position. And not because I say so, but because the best and the brightest experts in psychiatric disorders say so. It's, in other words, take my word for it, please. I know he's Looney Tunes, but if that's not sufficient for you, I refer you to the experts. We've got to get to that place.
Yeah, we do, and certainly we admire your passion for that, and all of this does line up with that DSM, or is that right, Joe? DSM.
DSM, yeah, the DSM. I guess we're at 5 right now. Yeah, and Barry, you have to have 5 of the 9 diagnostic characteristics to be qualified or to be diagnosed. Now, I've read where some doctors have said he has all 9. There is one other that says he has 7 of them, but of course he's well over the 5. And, we're talking about a profoundly mentally ill individual. In other words, Barry, step away from the buttons. You wouldn't take that from your airplane pilot. You wouldn't take that as the captain of a ship that you're riding on. You wouldn't even take that from a taxi driver. You're not going to put yourself in the hands of someone who is that nuts. So we've got to get to that place where it's a matter of self-survival. And because Barry is so profoundly mentally ill, he's of an extreme danger to us all. And here's another little point that, it sounds gloomy, it sounds scary, but, we've got to just start facing facts. These heads of state that are around the world, they all have dossiers on each other. If you think for 1 second that they walk into a room and negotiate on a subject and not know who they're talking to, think again, okay? So everything that I'm talking to you about right now, all of the heads of state around the world know already. I mean, can you imagine the snickering in the Kremlin behind closed doors when they discuss Barry? I mean, they've got to be rolling on the floor with laughter. And that's what's scary. Yeah. It's not. I'm telling it, but they all know too.
Of course, and of course, we're in a situation where Barry can be blackmailed, of course, and it probably is, and the mind control, by the purest definition, especially with a person like this who has been, and by all accounts continues to be, a drug abuser.
Absolutely, no doubt in my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go back to Hawaii for a moment here. Go back to the 70s. You and Barry Soetoro, they're your friends, your sphere of acquaintances back then. What are some of the things that you observed him do that people would be perhaps shocked or at least enlightened to hear about?
Well, I actually never was present in the same room while Barry was freebasing coke, but Barry used to tell us that he freebased coke. So his own personal testimony. And then also there was a physical characteristic that we all noticed, and it was a point of humor with us, that when a person has some melanin in their skin, they have, some, speaking, if they have some sort of browner complexion, when a person smokes cocaine, the residue from that cocaine gets on the lips. So, when they suck on the pipe, the cocaine residue. And so cocaine is a vasoconstrictor, so it makes it constricts blood flow to the tissues. So when Barry would smoke his cocaine, his lips would get dark. And it was kind of like a funny little thing where it's like Barry wore a sign on his face when he was abusing the cocaine. So, it was funny. In fact, to this day, if you perhaps will just go to Google, Obama pictures, whatever, click on a few of them. You'll see where his lips are like the regular color, and then there's other times where they're extremely dark. It's almost like he's got dark lipstick on, which, with Barry's homosexuality, we wouldn't put it past him to wear lipstick. But I'm saying it's not lipstick. In other words, you can see with your own eyes when he's been abusing the coke. And if you've even seen just recently, Barry is emaciated, gaunt, haggard. he looks like a junkie. Now, some people say, God, the pressure of that job and, poor Barry, right? Excuse me, Valerie Jarrett runs that White House, and Barry spends all of his time on the golf course or taking long, luxurious vacations at taxpayers' expense. So if anybody has a pampered life, it's Barry. And Barry does photo ops, and he reads a teleprompter. Barry is run by his handlers. Okay, Barry is not the brains of any operation, nothing of the sort. Barry follows instructions. So if you take a look at the type of really luxurious, pampered lifestyle that this guy leads, and then you take a look with your own eyes that the guy looks like he's, on a street corner being a junkie, 2 plus 2 equals 4. It's not too hard to figure out. And, Barry, even staffers whom are no longer employed at the White House, and there's been several of them, say that Barry has this little room that he likes to stay in all the time, and it's got big screen TVs, and he watches ESPN all day, and that is where it's speculated that he continues to get high. And what a lethal combination. I mean, you're talking about a clinically insane individual now add cocaine. Great.
Man.
Isn't that what we need? Great.
Wow. Yeah, exactly. Well, let's again go back to Hawaii here. What do you know about the Choom gang? Because we know that when he was going to high school, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Punahou.
Punahou.
Okay.
Yeah, Punahou.
Okay. He hung out with boys who loved basketball, good times, and decent students and athletes who went on to be, businessmen and lawyers and such. But they were members of this Choom gang.
Yeah.
And
that's pidgin.
Okay. So
Choom is a pidgin term, and it wasn't a gang. That's a colloquialism. It's hard for people from the mainland to probably relate to some of these terms that are what we call pidgin terminology. In fact, like if I were to speak to you in pidgin, you'd probably have a hard time understanding me. The Choom gang, it's just in other words, guys that would get together and smoke weed. That's really all that amounts to. But in Barry's case,
the good old Hawaiian buds.
Yeah, exactly. And he not only smoked the marijuana, but he, in the summers at least, he was into cocaine, and that was via Gay Ray, his drug dealer, of which he had to perform sexual favors to get the cocaine. Gay Ray was not passing out cocaine to people for free. You had to do something for Gay Ray for him to give you drugs. And Barry was broke. Barry had no money. He was, he was the type of guy, can I borrow $5? I'll pay you on Wednesday. Bye-bye $5. You'll never see that $5 again. He was a mooch. So, for him to get drugs, he basically, and I'm speaking candidly here, and I understand we're dealing with a Christian audience, but I think it's important that we get a clear picture. Look, Barry was, performing oral sex or bending over for Gay Ray in order to get drugs. I mean, the guy was a coke whore. Okay, I'm sorry to put it in such terms, but that's, it is what it is. So you're talking about, this speaks to Barry's character. Well, okay, he's a mentally ill person, and I suspect that he's, whatever traumas that he was exposed to as a young child fractured his mind. Either that or he's organically a sociopath, which, some of those things are genetically linked. But, whatever happened to him that flipped his mind over, he's an individual that you cannot put into the regular terms, the regular rationale, the sort of behavior that you would expect from a healthy-minded person. All bets are off with Barry. all bets are off. He has no ability to care about you.
Which is obviously it's consistent with that type of environment and drug usage. What about staying in Hawaii for a moment at that time? We've done a lot of research and found that he was kind of a trendsetter in a way, because he would start pot smoking trends within his group and groups. In fact, he coined the term total absorption, or TA, which means that anyone who exhaled smoking marijuana, and if you exhale the smoke prematurely, he'd assess them a penalty, and then of course, when passing the marijuana around, they'd get penalized. And then of course they'd roll up the windows in their car and suck the smoke down, but other things, interceptions, for example. Go ahead.
His whole rationale, his MO, is he feeds off of his narcissistic supply. So whereby he's not trying to please you or do you any favors when he tries to rope you into whatever scheme or scam. It's him requiring that narcissistic supply. And so any apparatus will do. If it wasn't marijuana smoking, to sort of rope you into, gee, Barry, you're so great, woo, boy. He's in other words, he's always looking for a customer. That's one of the reasons that he and I really didn't get along, is because even as a teenager, I'm not saying I'm super duper spidey sense or something, but in other words, I was just never his customer. And he really looks for people to throw it down for him. That's what he gets off on. And it's a bigger game than that. It's a bigger game because it's like if he can rope you in a little bit, now he's going to take that next move with you, and he'll use, abuse, and exploit you to whatever degree you will allow him to. That's his MO. Well, and that's indicative of his thing.
Right. Now, if I can ask you this, back in the 70s, when you're with a group of young people, and as you were, now I've heard you describe him as a foreigner and as a homosexual cocaine user. Okay, but describe to me, or describe to the audience, how, in other words, he presented himself as a foreigner. He walked around as somebody not from the United States. Okay.
Well, he didn't have an accent. Yeah, he didn't have an accent where you would immediately detect that, but he told everybody he was a foreign student. And he made up, remember, when Barry opens his mouth, only the outlandish bull comes out. So, he was always full of wild stories. And one of which was, I remember Mombasa. And this was a strange word for me back in the day. I hadn't yet gone to college, and I wasn't up on my geography, and I thought, Mombasa, I didn't know what that was. A person, is it a place, is it a thing? I didn't know what a Mombasa was. So I remember that term floating around, and then of course later on, I go to school. Oh yeah, Mombasa, Kenya. But at the time, I didn't know what a Mombasa was. So there was that conversation going around. And it was, in fact, we knew he went to Punahou. None of us went to Punahou, and that's an expensive school. And there's a certain amount of, in other words, like, wow, you go to Punahou kind of thing, right? It's kind of like, wow, you like any of these finer schools, and we all basically assumed that how he got in there was being a foreign student. There was some kind of a waiver or some sort of a exception or exemption for being a foreign student. And here's another thing that I want to just please convey to your listening audience. For people who think that Barry is an intellectual, please do not think that. And the reason, and I'll tell you something that should be proof in the pudding for you. Barry, okay, supposedly he went to Harvard, right? Well, if Barry was an intellectual, or if he had the capability of buckling down and actually being a good student and all of those things that it would require to get into that school, then why the millions and millions of dollars in bribes to get him into a school? You know? I mean, if the guy's an intellectual, then he should be able to carry his own weight, right? So the fact that all this money had to change hands for Barry to get into a school tells you that the guy's a bum. He doesn't possess the self-discipline. He doesn't do the work. He's not an intellectual. I can even remember back, now this is before I went to college, this is before I had an opportunity to be around really smart people, but Barry is not an intellectual. He's full of bull, yeah, but he's not, you know, an intellectual. In other words, he's certainly the no brains of any operation, for sure. He's a prolific liar. I mean, that's what he does for a living, but he's not, like, in other words, if you gave this guy a problem where he had to do the hard right over the easy wrong and figure it out and gut it out and, you know, make something happen in a positive sense, Barry has absolutely no capability in that department. None.
So, as you're painting this picture, I'm envisioning this guy walking around, going to Punahou, a relatively exclusive school in the area, but really not having any money, and
no,
just.
Did he
have a car?
No, he had no car. He was always in somebody else's car, and he lived in this real shabby little walk-up. In fact, I remember, you know, I can't remember the exact verbatim kind of conversation, or otherwise I'd supply it to you. But in other words, the idea was you live there and you go to Punahou? Because only the rich kids went to Punahou. Because we did notice that.
Okay.
Yeah, it was this shabby little walk-up. And let me tell you, like, the grandmother supposedly worked for the Bank of Hawaii. Well, I used to work for the Bank of Hawaii. I was a systems analyst for them in their securities and their mutual funds department. And I will tell you that banks are notorious for paying you peanuts. I mean, I worked with people that had been there 15, 20, 25 years, and they were only making $1 or $2 more an hour than I was. I mean, so there's no way that this grandmother who was supposedly a VP in some department at Bank of Hawaii, and she was pulling down the kind of money that it would take to get Barry through that school. Forget about it. No way. I'm telling you, I was there. I worked for Bank of Hawaii and Pacific Century Trust. I know what they pay. I used to look at my own paychecks. So the fact, you know, obviously there was some other money coming into the scene to get Barry in that place.
Okay. That's interesting because obviously it speaks to, you know, there's something that we call a continuing course of conduct. And if you want to get more specific, a continuing course of criminal conduct.
Correct.
You know, so you're describing, obviously, his time in Hawaii as a young older teen, young man, and of course extending through today. So getting back to his associations in Hawaii, you mentioned Gay Ray, which I've seen that name come up so many times.
Yeah, he was a real guy.
I don't. Okay. Now, I don't think you were privy necessarily to any intimate, you know, witnessing anything intimate, or perhaps I'm mistaken. I don't know if you saw Barry engage in any type of.
Well, I mean, he it was clear. It was, I wasn't in the room or anything, and Gay Ray and I would probably not intertwine simply because, one, I wasn't a drug user whereby I would pay for anything, and certainly I was broke. I didn't have any money for him, and I'm the wrong gender. You know, Gay Ray would have had no interest in me except, you know, just seeing him around kind of thing. So, no, Gay Ray is 100% Gay Ray, you know. In other words, there was no girl interaction at all going on with that. And, no, I never hung out at his house. I never, you know, I wouldn't have been invited. That would not have been some place that they would have had me, you know. I was on the periphery. of
Okay.
of that
Well,
scene.
but you were right there, and for the folks who don't know, Ray the dealer, he was a long-haired hippie guy who worked at a pizza shop, lived in a broken-down bus in an abandoned warehouse. He was kind of a scary dude, but he was
absolutely.
able to score some quality weed. Okay.
Oh, I mean, let me paint this picture for your audience. I mean, okay, Gay Ray was murdered by his gay lover. He was beat in the head with a hammer. Okay, the guy was a cruel dude. I mean, he really was. What he used to do is this gay lover of his, he used to torment the guy so badly. And of course, you have the interplay of the drugs involved, and so there's probably some psychosis going on there because of excessive drug use and so forth. But in other words, he used to torment his gay lover so badly that one day the guy lost his mind, grabbed a hammer, and beat Gay Ray's brains out. And he did 25 years in the penitentiary for that. So, I mean, you're talking about, an element of, Gay Ray was not a nice guy. He was as stone cold as any drug dealer that you would, imagine. He did bad things.
Well, yes. Yet, now, for those people who think, well, this is all just talk, I got to tell you, in his senior yearbook, Barry Soetoro, Barack Obama wrote, hey, thanks, Hutch, Gramps, Chewing Gang, and Ray. Yeah, Okay.
See, doesn't that show you how close their relationship was? I mean, out of all the things you're going to put in your yearbook, out of all the things, you're going to give a shout out to your drug dealer.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And I would have never thought, even back, in the 70s, I would have never thought of reaching out like that. I got to tell you, that's not exactly what I would. But anyway, very scandalous.
I mean, I wouldn't put. I mean, they might have been in love. I don't know what the level of emotion was between them, but they were close. And certainly Barry was Gay Ray's boy in the bed. So they obviously had some very intimate moments.
I guess so. Now, I haven't asked you this before because we haven't talked much before, but before this on-air interview. But do you know Larry Sinclair? Of course, Larry Sinclair is a man who wrote a book about his affair, with Obama back in Chicago. Later, much later. But it seems like what you're talking about lines up with the narrative offered by Larry Sinclair. Do you know Larry? Or have you talked to him?
No, I've never met him, and I've never spoke to him. He's one of those guys that I say, right on, brother. Lifestyle being different and so forth or whatever. That's not my place. It's not my place to judge that in any way. But the guy's got a lot of courage, and the scenario that Larry Sinclair described regarding, being involved in homosexual activities, and then Barry smoking his coke. In other words, it's a sort of a hand-in-hand thing, where, smoking the coke and getting it on with the dude is, the way it rolls for Barry.
Wow.
And I think it's happening to this day.
Oh, that's... Yeah, or so we can suspect, but I believe that to be true based on a lot of your information and other factors. So to wrap up your experience in Hawaii, because we're going to get into some things after the top of the hour here that I think are very important to get into. But what else in Hawaii that you can comment on with respect to, I don't know, his behavior, Barry, because I'm trying to wrap my brain around Barry Soetoro. Is there anything else in Hawaii that struck you as odd? I mean, not as if that's not enough, right?
It's like okay. I'm going to try to see if I can just put us all in that place. So picture kids sitting around, sitting on the grass at the park or whatever, and along comes Mr. Pied Piper, always full of some outlandish story. And, you just, in other words, we would all basically kind of roll our eyes and, oh, Barry, it's just, it was quite clear, even for knucklehead teenagers. That's how outlandish Barry was. Like I say, I kind of focused in on him simply because of some background and how I was reared by an operator to, like some of my earliest memories from my dad was, how to spot inconsistencies and things. So I might have been a little more astute, but pretty much Barry, if he had any friends, he burned them off fairly quickly because of the usury. People, he might have baffled them for a minute, but then, after Barry got through using them for a while, they got tired of him, and then he'd burn through people. So it was like that.
Okay.
You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out after a while, this guy's pretty much good for nothing. All he wants to do is take.
I get that. Yep, I totally understand. Well, okay, so here we have Barry Soetoro. Was he ever known by any other name other than Barry in Hawaii? I mean, Barack wasn't even on the radar back then, right?
No, Barack. There was nothing to my knowledge, and I only knew him as Barry. And then subsequently, this is much later, I think, if this can be true, because you can't really depend on really anything because his past is all fiction, but supposedly his last name at Punahou was Obama. But I never heard that name Obama before. I only heard Barry Soetoro. Now, and again, Barry is a compartmentalizing, chameleon-like character, and he will size you up and take inventory about what your capabilities are. And so I think he might have looked at us as kids that were not going to be attending Punahou in the fall, and then, it was like he had a certain character with us that he might not have had when he's around his Punahou friends, that kind of thing. So, if he did use Obama, I never heard that. I only remember Soetoro, because they used to call him, in Pidgin, a black guy, they call him Popolo, and I remember Popolo Soetoro. That's what they used to call him, Popolo Soetoro. Popolo Soetoro, right. So, and that's just, in other words, it's not even a derogatory term per se, just like white people are howlies, So, in other words, it's a descriptive term. But, Popolo Soetoro. So I never heard Obama before. In fact, when Barry came up on the scene in 2008, I recognized him by face, and it was kind of hilarious to me that he changed his name, but it was a complete surprise to me that the Barack Obama. I never heard that before.
Yeah, Mia, I'll tell you what, we're coming up here within a few minutes of the top of the hour where we'll take a break, and you can get a glass of water, and we're going to be continuing this in the second hour. But before we break, Joe's been waving his arms over here and want me to ask you. Well, Joe, go ahead. I mean, because we've gotten a lot of feedback from the audience, a lot of questions for you.
Sure.
Joe, you were waving there, and I'm just going to defer to you on this.
One of the most common questions I'm getting is, have you ever been threatened?
Oh, yeah, a lot of people ask me that. Yeah, I have had some veiled threats via comments on blogs and that sort of thing. Honestly, which has been very heartwarming, the support has been overwhelming, positive. And I get threats in the nature of, like some of these intelligence agencies are going to set me up or frame me or railroad me or, try to suicide me or stuff like that. By the way, for the record, I'm not suicidal, so, if anything happens, just for the record, I didn't do it myself, and that sort of thing. But see, here's
Isn't
the level
sad
of desperation. Isn't that sad? Yeah. Here's the level of desperation that I'm at this point, seeing the world with open eyes. This is selfish and noble reasons that I'm stepping out of my comfort zone to do this. In other words, if I see this situation and I do nothing, I'm sort of complicit, at least in my own mind, in my own character, my own conscience. It's like, in other words, I just simply refuse to be a coward and sit there and passively watch these criminals do us like that. So I almost, I'm not trying to invite negative fate, but I didn't get into this game in the first place to be afraid. I'm not going to tolerate it. You know what I mean? It's a resolve.
We admire that.
Yeah, it's a resolve.
Yeah,
it's a thing like selfish and noble reasons. Hey, if we go down the tubes, I'm going down in the ship with the rest of everybody else.
Exactly.
I gotta fish or cut bait at some point.
And we have a lot of questions about, for example, what took you so long, for example, to speak out? Because it's only been recently, the last 5 years perhaps, that you've been vocal. But that after the break, we'll get into that. But before we do take the break,
I'll be happy to speak to that.
Okay. Now, before we take the break, do you have a website or anything at all, a Facebook presence, social networking presence, or anything?
No, I'm one of those people that just does not participate in any social media. And since I'm just a private citizen, I'm a biologist by training. I'm not in the media industry. I don't have a website. I've never made a nickel off of any of my interviews, and I've done quite a few now. So I don't have a financial or physical presence in that way. And I'm just one of those people that just doesn't see the sense in putting my personal information on the Internet like that, like as a social media. I know a lot of people love it. I just don't comprehend that. So I just, have an email address, and I'm certainly happy to reach out to other programs, and I'll explain why I didn't come out in 2008.
Yeah, you're one of the smart ones without a Facebook page, and I do admire that, folks. I've got to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure. Knowing Mia Marie Pope is a pleasure, because she's very humble. She's very articulate in terms of the information that she has, very detail conscious and very accurate, very concerned with accuracy, but also very concerned with getting the truth out there. On the other side of the break, Mia is going to talk about what took her so long, and what she did to attempt to get the word out there with the intelligence agencies and other agencies about Barry Soetoro. Stay with us.
Excellent. With that, we'll take a break. Ladies and gentlemen, to hour number 3 of this Monday edition of the Hagmann Hagmann Report. Tonight, our guest is Mia Marie Pope, and you can go to our website or on the right-hand side under Monday on the Hagmann Hagmann Report, or listen, and I'll give it to you now. MiaPope1@AOL.com is her email address if you have any questions, or if you want to send her any supportive emails, or for whatever reason. MiaPope1@AOL.com is her email address, and we are with Mia Marie Pope, and she is our guest. We were talking about the early days of our now president, and a person who personally knew him, and by a completely different personality, well, maybe not a different personality, but under a different name and identity almost, as it seems. Let's pick up right where we left off on the other side, Mia. What was it that made you hesitate or wait to come out with the information that you were talking about today?
Yeah, it's my pleasure to speak to that. Well, first off, as an ordinary citizen, in 2008, I had not yet seen the damage that Barry was causing and about to cause. Because keep in mind, my motivation is one of my country, and as a sense of duty to stand up for that. In 2008, I had yet, I knew what a lousy individual Barry was back in the 70s, but I think I had somewhat of the benefit of the doubt, as in, let me see what's happening now. And the other part was I came over to the mainland, which I live on the mainland here now, but in 2006 from Hawaii. And the job market here was quite poor. In other words, there's a lot more money in Hawaii than there is where I live in Spokane. So I wound up taking a job where I traveled constantly. I mean, I just was on the road constantly. So I wasn't looking at television ever. I wasn't plugged in. It was taking all of my efforts and energy to just perform that job. So I did that up until 2010. Now, by 2010, I'm waking up. I'm getting to the point like, oh boy, there's Barry. I saw those same patterns that I used to see back in the 70s. This is not looking good. But now, this could be my fault. You judge me as you wish, but I was not savvy to media. I was not, I didn't know how to really break into the situation. Now, you better believe with friends, family, acquaintances, I was screaming it from the rooftops. But as far as getting on programs and things like that, I just kind of assumed that, I hadn't written a book. I'm not a media presence. Who's going to want to have me, that type of thing. So what wound up happening, and the God's hand, is I was making a small donation to Pastor Manning's kitchen. You know how he feeds the kids there in Adla in Harlem? Gives them a hot breakfast so they can go to school with a full stomach. And I made a donation. I just so happened to get Mrs. Manning on the phone, and I had heard the different rhetoric from Pastor Manning, so I figured somebody would at least be willing to listen to me. And I just said, hey, I got some information to share, just for whatever it's worth, having no idea that day, in fact, minutes later, I would be on his show. And so you can probably see that I'm a little bit more comfortable now after having done a bunch of interviews. The first one, I was nervous. I had no time to prepare. It was just kind of threw me in, right? And, just talking off the top of my head to get the best of my recollection about things. So that's how it started. And then, of course, within days, the presentation went viral, within days. And so if you sort of add up all the uploads to YouTube and Google and different things like that, and which is just a fraction of the interviews that I've done, because not everybody uploads the interviews to the internet. Right now, I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 million or so. So it just went out of control, which speaks to maybe why I don't have a hit team or something coming to my house. That's probably a little bit why, because they didn't have time to stop me. They didn't, I'm not saying that I'm all that important. I'm actually, you know what I mean? Like, I'm actually only bringing forth information that is common knowledge in the intelligence communities. So there's no real big revelations if you're in the know. But my concern is that I don't want my fellow Americans to continue to be bamboozled by this idiot. So there's a reason and a motivation for me speaking out so that we all can have cooler heads to prevail. But what I'm talking about is common knowledge already in Washington, D.C.
Well, yeah.
But common knowledge.
Sadly, but sadly, and I've seen the comments on from the YouTube, and also you had sent me a series of articles about his cocaine use and drug use, and I see the comments saying, well, we all know this has all been in the public, it's public knowledge. But you bring a specific level of intimacy, if that's the correct word, to this, and you're saying, look, it's just not the drug use, but it's the relationships that he had in Hawaii, and of course your observations from Barry Soetoro to Barack Obama, this transformation. I guess at this point I have to ask you. Okay, so you spent a lot of time on the road and away from TVs, and you really didn't see the totality of the destruction. Bang,
Absolutely.
you did. Okay,
I saw the same old Barry. Eventually, I saw the same old Barry, that same full of bull, same pattern. Maybe my eye is a little bit more trained because of my background, but I saw the same old pattern, and it worried me big time. And then, that prompted, literally, we have no choice but to invoke the 25th Amendment. If ever there was a poster child for that, this is the guy. You would not tolerate a completely, profoundly mentally ill individual being in charge of anything. And for the love of God, we have got to take things back. I don't know what that exactly looks like, whether we storm the White House. I don't know. If we have a national sit-down, I don't know. But Barry is a coward. I will tell you this, is that if you confront Barry, remember I was telling you how I used to tell him, shut up, Barry. I guess I was a kind of a mouthy, mean girl type of teenager. I'm a very compassionate person. I'm not a mean person. But, back in the day, I think I used to run my mouth. And I used to tell him, shut up, Barry. And first thing he will do is, like, his head will spin around 2 or 3 times and spit soup like he has a temper. But if you go toe-to-toe with him, and you hold your position, like double down on him, he runs away. He is an absolute coward. I used to do it to him. In other words, oh yeah, Barry, now what? Shut up. And he's just like a complete wimp.
Wow.
If you double down on him, that's why I want to give this as ammo to our fellow citizens. If we double down on Barry, he'll run for the bunker. He'll run. He's a coward.
Very interesting. Well, a characteristic we certainly don't need in an executive position.
Sure.
I guess.
And don't think for a second the other heads of state don't know this.
Of course.
They all
and
know
we're seeing us getting trampled. Yeah. Well, Mia, how did how did we go from Barry Soetoro to Barack Obama, from Barry Soetoro of a foreigner cocaine user to Barack Obama, the chief executive? Yeah. What did you? Obviously you had concerns. Did you try to contact the FBI or anybody and say, "Wait a minute, we got a problem"?
Right.
When did you do that?
I did contact the FBI on several occasions, and I'll tell you what I did, because I thinking, okay, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to call the FBI and say, hey, I knew this guy back in the 70s, so go ahead and open a case. I figured that wasn't good enough, right? So I did some research, and I found out about all of his fake Social Security numbers, and I had a police officer friend who just did me a personal favor and let me look at a database. I don't have a license. I'm not, in that business. And I saw all of his fake Social Security numbers and stuff, and fake addresses and, obvious fake stuff, 123 Main Street, 1234 Happy Lane, just very cavalier, very careless, and he has a complete record of that. So I thought, okay, that'll give me my entree to the FBI, and then maybe they'll listen to me. They completely dismissed me. Let's face it, the FBI is not our friends. They're not into taking care of this country. It saddens me, but, obviously they do some good things, but I'm just simply saying that the bad really outweighs the good with them, and they protect Barry. And they have the most sophisticated technology on planet Earth. So if I can do some research with a simple laptop and an Internet connection, you mean to tell me that I can come up with things that they can't? So it's clearly a crooked operation, and that's one of the reasons we're in big trouble. But one of the things I'm an avid researcher. I just do this because that's just kind of how I'm wired. I love to read. I love to research stuff. in 2008, it's possible that Barry's handlers, put him. Obviously he was installed by his handlers because these are enemies of America that want to bring America down. And so he might have had people, the voters, bamboozled in 2008. But by 2012, people were already well awake by the millions and despised Barry. And we've already uncovered, me and many others, even documentaries have been made about this, where they have these Diebold electronic voting machines. So you vote for candidate A, and it racks up 2 for candidate B. And it had all of this uncovering of how people, would go into the polls and vote 20 and 30 times, and then a bunch of dead people voting. And so the 2012 thing is a huge scam, and all of the evidence points to that. Now, I have a huge amount of respect for the office itself, president, but I don't have any respect for any old criminal in it. So one of the reasons why I am so derogatory and condescending towards Barry, one of which he's an enemy of my country, and he's trying to burn my country down, so that means he's on my list of things to do. But I don't think he was ever in 2012, and the evidence is overwhelming. And here's another one with the proof already in the pudding, and I'll explain this, and I think it should resonate with people. You got Chuck Hagel, who was appointed as Secretary of Defense. Now, Chuck Hagel has 0 qualifications for a position like that. I mean, no background, nothing. He used to run Diebold electronic voting machines. Okay, so does that smell like a payoff to anybody? That I mean, does anybody smelling payoff there? So you got a guy who is, and that's a money position. You got that military-industrial complex going, and that's a. So I mean, out of all people in the world to put as Secretary of Defense, you're going to put Chuck Hagel in? Oh, by the way, he ran Diebold electronic voting machines. Come on, look at the players. You got George Soros, that miscreant. He's George Soros has got a invested interest in the software that's used for Diebold electronic voting machines. Don't take my word for it. Just with a couple of clicks, it should take you about 20 minutes to uncover that. So Barry was never even elected in 2012.
Well, and I do believe the black box voting situation was such that a good case can be made against that. We've got so many listener questions. In fact, I'm going to give you one right now.
Sure, roll them out.
Marie Ann, now she is from Calgary. She wants to know if you had seen any indication of Barry being a Muslim or, of the Muslim faith in Hawaii.
None whatsoever. And let me speak to that. Now, Barry wears that Allah ring, that he tries to play off like it's a wedding band. It's not, by the way, right? Everybody knows that he's been wearing that ring since he was about 18 or 19 years old, and it has Arabic writing on it. In the translation in Arabic is no God but Allah. It's written right on his ring. So obviously he has some kind of hook into this Muslim thing, and I believe it's because they're funding him. In other words, it's a business deal. It's business.
Right.
So to answer the question is none whatsoever. Muslim, nothing in Hawaii about him acting, walking, talking like a Muslim, no. And don't think for a second that Barry prays to Allah 5 times a day, please. Now, my personal take is that in light of my extensive research on this, studying his psychiatric disorder and trying my very darndest to be as expert as I can on this, and I didn't diagnose him myself, but the best and the brightest have, he's too mentally ill to be any religion because it requires a level of sincerity, if you are going to be a faith of one or another. You have to have the mental capacity to be sincere. Barry does not possess the mental capacity to be sincere.
Okay.
So in my opinion, no, I don't think he's truly a Muslim. Nah, he's got deals. Like he's in bed with the Muslim Brotherhood. He's in bed with all kinds of things, but not a legitimate Muslim. No.
Okay. All right. And Charles now from Macon, Georgia wants to know, during your time with and surrounding with the gang there or the group of people in Hawaii specifically, did you witness Obama with any type of people that were known communists, socialists, or had this proclivity toward the communism or socialism?
Yeah, I'll say that I might have, but being kind of a knucklehead teenager, that was a little bit outside of my league as far as being astute to those political formats. I'm a high school kid, right? So I wasn't. Not to say that.
Sure.
There very well may have been quite a bit of interaction that just sort of blew past me, but I didn't. In other words, no rhetoric out of Barry's mouth regarding that sort of thing. No. He was just a little punk hustler.
He wasn't political to you.
No.
Okay.
No. He was just like if you had say you were sitting right beside me, and we were, back in the day, you would think, hustler, punk, druggy,
right?
Gay,
okay.
Nothing political.
Okay, all right. Now we've got Robert, and I'm not sure exactly. Robert from Iowa. I'm not sure exactly where in Iowa. Wants to know if. Let me just distill this question down here a little bit. Okay. Was he involved in any female relationships when he was in Hawaii that you were aware of? Any good friends or dates or anything like that?
No. I mean, as I learned subsequently, he might have gone to maybe a dance or something with a girl. Now, I'll speak to this as a female, and maybe a little shout out to the ladies out there that'll know what I'm talking about. When we're 12, 13, 14, the world changes for us, right? And guys start hitting on us, and, it's a different deal, and the world becomes kind of a different place. Sure. One of the things that we can sense is if a guy is interested in us or hitting on us or, all that stuff is like a big neon sign for us girls, okay? One of the things that I definitely knew and noticed is that Barry had even almost maybe like a little bit of a disdain for females. So he was definitely not interested in women or girls or, definitely not.
No.
There was nothing in him that said red-blooded, male, into girls, none of that. No. And we can tell. Like I say, only the ladies will know what I'm talking about, but we can tell.
Okay, and I believe that. Now, Ann, let's see, Ann M. here from Spokane, in your neck of the woods, I guess.
In my neck of the woods.
Wants to know if you had met his any members of his family, or if Obama or Barry had talked about any members of his family, whether it be his brother, mother, grandparents, whatever, during your time.
Let me see. Let me kind of stroll back. There was one time, and this is just a very vague kind of thing. I saw him hugging a lady with long, dark brown hair. Again, I subsequently saw pictures later and found out that was his mother. And this could have been a whole other different lady. I saw him hugging this one lady, in other words, old enough to be his mother. So,
sure.
And then he might have, without any verbatim recollection, he might have mentioned things about Tutu and Gramps. Tutu, by the way, is a pidgin term for grandmother, right? So he might have said some things about that, but nothing of mention worthy. No, that wasn't
okay.
the course of conversation that we would have really had, By the way, Doug.
Yeah.
You know what?
Sure.
Just a little thing here, just in case. Okay, when I tried to call in with my landline, I was not able to get through. I don't know if you're getting cyber whacked or whatever. And I'm on the cell right now. If in case I bleep out, I'm going to call you back on another cell. Just a little heads up. I mean, I hopefully we're going to make it through this next half an hour, but just a little heads up on that because I hear a beeping in the background. But don't worry, I've got another charged up cell that I'll be able to just call right back in if that happens to us. Okay.
Sounds good. I take it the same area code, right? In case we have to identify
509. It'll be the same area code.
Right. All right. What? I guess at this point, what haven't we covered that you feel is important?
Let's take a look here.
Given your background, and I think, folks, Mia Marie Pope has got a very interesting background, and as she indicated early on, it's a background that perhaps could be used to detract from the message, okay? But it puts her in a unique position with respect to, understanding how secret societies work. But I guess one of my big question, too, is, do you see Obama as being managed by maybe someone like your
absolutely.
father?
There's no doubt about it. Barry's run by his handlers. Now, as far as like I say, I probably have as much knowledge as any 33rd degree Mason. I mean, it's Luciferian. So if anybody is a Mason out there, and if you're, first, second, third, fourth, fifth degree or something like that, they call you porch brethren, and you really don't know what you're involved with. Once you get higher up in the degrees, then the real truth about stuff gets unfolded to you, and it's Luciferian to the core. So like I say, if you are a Mason and you don't know what I'm telling you, that just means you're too low on the totem pole. So now, I think I don't think Barry was installed. Not unlike Hitler or any of these other mentally ill people, they know full well how sick he is, and if he requires that narcissistic supply, he'll do anything for it. Are you there?
Which
sorry.
we're here.
We bleeped out for a second. Sorry. Yeah, sorry. I'm kind of waiting for this phone to go out. So anyway, he in other words, he was installed because of his mental illness. The guy has no conscience. He'll sail anybody down the river and not think anything of it. So he's perfect for the job if you're a globalist and want a one world order agenda to prevail. He's perfect because you can't beat America coming to our shores. You can't knock us over fighting us from the outside. You got to put a sicko freak and rot it from within, and that was the strategy with Barry.
Interesting. And you're obviously very well researched in the secret societies and the globalist agenda. So
I have an advanced degree in it. I was raised on it. I mean, there's no part of sacred geometry, and the G, like at least as I was taught, is Guyonum, and I know all the little words and all the meanings and the symbols, and so I view the world probably a little different than a lot of my fellow Americans, because I can see through it. You know what I mean? I was raised on this stuff. And my dad wasn't technically supposed to tell me all the secrets, but he was kind of a renegade like that. And in my heart of hearts, I think he was actually training me to kind of follow in his footsteps. I, of course, would never do that, but I think that was what he had in mind. I think he was trying to train me to be a protege.
Did your folks ever meet Barry? I mean, did they ever have the occasion to meet him or hang around with him, or not hang around with him, but the parents of a teenager would meet, their daughter's friends?
No, I don't believe that ever happened. My dad was, literally, like, he'd leave the house, and, I might not see him for a day or two, or, I was literally very unsupervised when I was a teenager, very unsupervised. So, no, I don't believe that.
Okay.
My dad since passed away. Here's another little tidbit, and it's, not to be macabre, but maybe it's a little mention worthy. So my dad was more than likely murdered in 1994 in West Palm Beach, Florida. They ruled it as a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head, but either he did it himself or somebody did it for him. So, he's since passed away in 1994.
I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah, I've done the emotional work already, so it's
Wow.
not an issue. No, it's no skeleton in my closet. But again, it's, in other words, all I'm trying to do is put the stuff out on the table so that the message will never get lost on somebody trying to put a microscope on me and, bamboozle people. That's my only motivation really, for saying that.
What's the most important thing that we should walk away with the information that you have brought forth? Just to recap for the folks listening, we're talking with Mia Marie Pope, who knew Barack Obama as Barry Soetoro in Hawaii back in the 70s. She refers to him, and he presented himself to her and others as a foreigner, and obviously a cocaine user, drug user, both marijuana, cocaine, and crack. And by the way, I heard you talk about the crack issue, getting back to Hawaii there. That was kind of unusual back in the 70s, wasn't it?
Oh, sure. Anybody remember who's that comedian that lit himself on fire? Yeah, Richard Pryor. Okay,
yeah,
so
Richard Pryor.
He used to be, before crack cocaine came out, cocaine was in the powder form. So it was either cut with lactose or whatever filler, And so as I understand it, in order to get the more profound high, they would take the the cocaine rather, it's powder, and then they would add baking soda and some water, and then cook it a little bit, and that would make the filler, whether lactose or whatever, separate from the actual cocaine itself, and they called that freebasing. And so that's Barry's drug of choice. That's what he loves to do. Now, would he smoke coke and crack and whatever else? Sure, as that came along later, but just so happens that back in that time, cocaine was just in powder form, or at least in Hawaii it was that way.
Would you get this from Gay Ray or Ray Boyer? Is that who he
Raymond
get
Boyer,
this,
right?
Exclusively?
Yeah, Gay Ray dealt cocaine along with marijuana, and I'm sure he dealt whatever else he could get his hands on too. Probably acid, LSD, anything.
Okay.
It's all to make a buck, right?
Okay.
So I'm sure he dealt.
Yeah,
he dealt whatever.
Okay. All right. Now, what about Obama's, and this is from Sarah Jane, asked not to give the location. Okay, we won't. What about Obama's appearance? Was he always the frail looking, and as he is today? Because, you see how he's kind of bony and frail looking. Was he that way in high school? And if so, was it indicative, obviously? Go ahead.
Yeah, thinner type build, and he kind of looked exactly the same, of course, a younger version, but his teeth have been fixed. So, you could tell that today Barry's had, extensive dental work done, where he's had his teeth capped or whatever. His regular teeth were more uneven, and the incisor teeth, the canine teeth, were stuck out more. But essentially, Barry looked fairly healthy back in the day. I mean, he was not a fat person or anything, but he looked, fairly healthy, and not, it's today. That's why I say the contrast is, if you think, oh, poor Barry, he got so much pressure. First of all, that's ridiculous, okay, because Barry is certainly not the brains of any operation whatsoever. Barry is handled by his handlers, And he's on the golf course all the time, and he's playing around, and he's in his little room, and he's taking luxurious, lavish vacations at taxpayers' expense. So my question is if drugs are not involved, which I think they are, but if they're not involved, then why does Barry look like a junkie? Because he sure does look like a junkie.
Yeah, I can say that I've seen my share of drug users and abusers. And I'll say this: the aging process, and you know, stress. Okay, I think you had said what, $44 million he spent on taxpayer money of.
Yeah, that's
Go
a
ahead.
very conservative figure. I have a lady friend of mine who is a private investigator who has, the license and the database and everything, and I met her, after I started doing interviews. That figure actually double that. That's actually a very aged figure, the $44 million. It's pretty much double that. And here's the other, just to give you an indication of the level of abuse and how these people have no concept of reality. When Barry goes off on his vacations, they don't even care about putting a good face forward. Like Michelle, for whatever reason, can't seem to get her act together to leave at the same time that Barry leaves. So Air Force One, and that's like, what is it, like $1 million a minute or something to run that operation, they take Barry to wherever the destination is and then have to come back to go pick up Michelle and then take her, and then, you know what I mean? And so, like, the level of just exploitation and abuse, and, these people they're gone from reality.
Interesting, yes. Well,
yeah,
that kind of segues into our next...
Any one of us would love to have his lifestyle,
Sure. Yeah, exactly. It segues into our next question from, interestingly enough, Michelle from Rhode Island, where she says, snowy Rhode Island, wants to know your thoughts, given your knowledge of Barry in the 70s. Your thoughts on Michelle Obama, okay? In other words, I'm going to let you just go wherever you want to go with that one.
Okay, and of course I've never met Michelle. I don't know her or him, Mr. Michelle, whatever it is. Now I'm going to just put on my science hat for a second. Okay, I am a biologist. I've cracked a book or two in my life. So I'm saying that this individual appears to have many male characteristics. Now these are physiological things that all the plastic surgery in the world will never hide. And, again, don't have to take my word for it. A couple of clicks, you can see it for yourself. There's how the torso is, where the elbows meet at the midline of the torso, fingers, stuff like that. So this individual is, certainly, anybody with eyesight can tell this is a very masculine-looking female if it's a female. But there are some characteristics that, really indicate male persuasion. And here's the funny thing. With the way we have the PCR now, and if you work in the service industry and you ever get Michelle at a restaurant, save the glass. Love to send it to a lab and see if we can get an XY chromosome, because XY is the male, right? So, in other words, we could do a DNA test and put all those questions to rest. But if you ask me, I'm thinking male. And the reason I think it's she's male is because Barry is so gay that I don't think he could peacefully cohabitate with a real female.
How would you explain her? Well, I guess I was going to say, how would you explain their children? But that's kind of a ignorant question for me to even ask.
I mean, if you look at the skull, her skull structure, there's all sorts of little clues. I mean, you might consider having a medical expert on your show, perhaps, to just go through these constructs and clear up everything for people. But even just as a, I passed anatomy and physiology, and I'm not exactly a complete stranger to this subject. There's a lot of characteristics there, and all the makeup and the hormones is not going to cover it.
Yeah, and we've seen, look, folks, we've seen, and if you've been on the internet looking, we've seen the potential or the allegations, the assertions that maybe Michelle is not the individual she presents herself to be.
Oh.
And we'll just leave it at that. I mean,
how wrapped tight can... Exactly. I mean, you figure her and Barry, you're talking about a clinically insane individual, Barry. If she's a healthy-minded person, they wouldn't mesh. So she's got to have a screw loose herself somewhere. I mean, come on, birds of a feather fly together. There's no way that she's a regular, normal, rational, healthy person. Otherwise, she wouldn't be hooked up with Barry.
Well, that's true. Now, go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, well, with all the knowledge you say that your dad taught you and your background here, knowing him, what do you think the intention was for having him as president? Do you think they wanted somebody in there that they could, just basically use and abuse to implement a greater agenda?
Correct.
I know you
absolutely
kind of stated this when you first came on.
Absolutely. I think we can break it down to these very simple terms. You cannot knock America over by attacking us from the shores. The only way you're going to get any traction to get this agenda perpetrated is by rotting it from within. And so essentially Barry was selected because first he has a predilection that he hates America. His background speaks to that. And then you also have a sociopath who will not have a conscience about whatever damage he does. So in a way, he's quite perfect for the job if your intention is to bring America to its knees.
Well, yeah, and that's about the only way that it can be done is from within, and we know that he's brought a lot of damage internally, obviously, and
absolutely. I mean, we could be here all day if I went down his list of crimes. We would sit here for hours, and if I tick off all the crimes, treasonous, horrifying things that he's done behind the scenes to debilitate America. I mean, take a look. Okay, take one thing, for example. I hope we don't bleep out while I'm in the middle of this. Is people who have been born and raised in America, have been taxpayers all of their adult life, can't find work. Now, you're going to open up the borders, and all of this unskilled labor comes in, and that's to do, it's so obvious that Barry is doing everything in his power to degrade us and to make it impossible. And those poor people from these Latin American countries, all they're going to do is wind up being slave labor. I mean, you're talking about you've got a language barrier, you've got a culture barrier, you have unskilled labor, and they're surrounded by a bunch of Americans that resent them. I wouldn't want to be in that position. The predators are going to come out of the woodwork and take advantage of these poor people, and they're going to be doing really nasty, dirty jobs for slave wages if they get a wage. And I think we're going to see and hear all the horror stories about the sex rings and all of the different exploitations. Again, anything that Barry is involved with, there's going to be damage. So if you are a Latin brother and sister out there, Barry is not your friend. Barry does not care about you. All he's trying to do is, one, degrade society and break the middle class down, but he's also trying to get a voting bloc together to get our guns. And you got people who are from these countries that are used to having governments tell them what to do, and they're used to being disarmed, and they have a cultural mindset that if you try to play guns as boogeymen and these people get complete amnesty and can vote, that's a whole voting block right there to come after your guns. And that's what the agenda is. And these poor people, all they're going to wind up doing is being somebody's slave. It's sad.
Very well stated. Mia, because we only have about 10 minutes left, rather than have you go through the whole process of switching out phones, and I know you're kind of cutting out a little bit right now. What we're coming up toward the end of the program anyway. What would be? Give us your closing thoughts of what we should be doing, what you'd like to see done here. Just for the next few minutes here, give us your closing thoughts.
Okay. If I on my wish list, Santa, this is what I want for Christmas. Okay. If you must repeat this to yourself as a mantra, do so. You are the boss. We're all the bosses. We tell them, they don't tell us. It's our rules. It's our way or the highway. Not criminals in Washington, D.C., not that idiot Barry Soetoro going to tell us what time it is or how it's going to be or any of that. We're the bosses. We pay the bills. That means we pay the cost to be the boss, period. End of story. Get that to your toes. If you have to repeat it to yourself, or if you have to play the game, what would I do if I had a guest in my home and they continue to abuse me? What would I do? Maybe you have to rehearse that to yourself so that you can get that resolve. What do you do when somebody has no respect for you, continually uses, abuses, and exploits you? You show them the door. Show Barry Soetoro the door. Your life depends on it. Because if these criminals have their way, your life is going to really suck. My life's going to suck. Your life is going to suck. Everybody's life is going to really suck if these criminals have their way. And your children certainly have no future.
No, that's very true, and that's why we're on the air to attempt to change that, and do whatever we can to change it. But I think your message, though, is one that we have to realize that we are in charge, and we've got to do something. And we're not spectators in this life. We are. Exactly. Well, Mia, I just want to thank you so much. Again, we're at basically the close of the program. I want to thank you so much for your time tonight. Really, a very passionate woman with a very passionate message, an important message, one who hung out with or knew Barry Soetoro in Hawaii. Mia, your email address is on hagmannhagmann.com. Would you encourage people to contact you with any questions or any comments or any Okay, good. Okay.
Yeah, sure. You know what? I return every phone call. My number's already out there. My email's out there. I enjoy that, either corresponding, with folks and whatever, answer questions, or if you have even a little YouTube channel or whatever, and you need somebody to come in and be a guest, it'd be my pleasure. Because I'm in the game to get this thing done. You know what I mean? I'm at my fellow Americans' disposal, so to speak. It's my pleasure. I got to do my part. Hey, look, if we lose this game, we're all screwed.
Very succinctly said. Indeed, we are. Mia, I just want to say thank you on behalf of both Joe and I. We want to thank you very much for your gift of time tonight.
My pleasure.
A very enlightening conversation.
You guys are so great. You guys are wonderful.
Well,
you do tremendous work. I'm a big fan. When I spoke to Joe when we first booked this, I immediately said, "Oh, Hagmann, I'm a big fan. I love you guys. You do terrific work, and we're going to win this thing, brothers. We're going to win. They're going to lose. We're going to
win." One way or another. Indeed, we are.
One way or another.
I just want to say God bless you. That's right. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
And we'll be back in touch. And don't be a stranger. And God bless you. Thank you again.
Thank you. God bless you back.
Great.
Okay. Take care, folks.
All right.
And good night, America.
Right.
Bye.
Good night. All right, folks. That was oh my goodness. That was Mia Marie Pope, knowing Barry Soetoro in Hawaii. Joe, wow. Well, you hung out with a pretty rough crowd when you were growing up, right? I mean, no, I shouldn't say rough crowd, but one that they were.
Yeah.
And you could pick out those people that would be heavy into drugs, and you knew where to go for drugs, right? I mean, it's no secret.
No, not really.
And back in the 70s, it was no different.
Yeah, I didn't live in the 70s, but in my day and age, it definitely wasn't hard.
Yeah, and it's just, I guess the bottom line here, folks, is, we've been sold a really big bill of goods, a big lie, and Mia's message is so consistent with Larry Sinclair, his message, and when you take all of these bits and pieces of evidence, some anecdotal, some direct, some at the periphery of things, you begin to get this picture. Well, the mainstream media, corporate American media, is certainly not giving us anything. So you turn to people like this and say, okay, what do you know? What do you know? And what she knows is what he was doing back in the 70s. Now, how's that relevant today? And having talked with her off air, given her background, given her her parents, you heard what she said about her father. Look.
A lot more questions. A lot more. This brings a lot more questions into the, how from point A to point B. How'd that happen?
Yeah. But look, her sincerity, I would say too, listen to her on Pastor Manning's channel as well. She's been on there a couple of times. Very, very interesting. Her research too. After, it's kind of like waking up and saying, wait a minute, we've got, here's a guy I knew in high school, and then bam, waking up and saying, okay, we've got to, let me see what I can find out and what I missed, during that absence, and here we are. So, folks, I'd urge you, her email address is on our website at hagmanhagmann.com on the right-hand side under tonight's guest. Send her an email telling her what you thought, and even a supportive one. Because I'll tell you one thing: in talking with her and corresponding with her, she's not very well liked. When I say not well liked by the supporters, and she's putting herself out there. So, hey, any words of support, anyone that's trying to get the truth out, let's try to uplift her, and certainly we'll be checking back with her again. But Joe, tonight I'll be on Coast to Coast AM for the first hour, and we've got a busy week planned. Of course, the end of this week you're leaving, and we're both leaving actually, just different days for Orlando, the Prophecy in the News Conference. Ladies and gentlemen, if you can get there, please do so. Get there.
Absolutely, and get to the live stream link off of hagmanhagmann.com or prophecyinthenews.com. If you can't get there, it's $50. Sign up for the live stream feed that you can keep long after the conference.
Absolutely. Now, tomorrow night, Stan Dale, and then on Wednesday we've got a very special program with Pastor David Langford and Steve Quayle. We're going to be talking about something a little bit different, talking about the lateness of the hour, but in the very... a very focused discussion about what's going on all around us. And that's Pastor Langford and Steve Quayle on Wednesday. Friday, we've got Nathan Leal, which that's going to be an interesting program. And then Thursday, don't miss Thursday, because we've got Paul McGuire coming on Thursday.
Should be a great week. Looking forward to it. I want to thank each and everybody for joining us tonight. We'll be back tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Until then, stay safe. God bless. Have a great night.
Good night.